Now listen to this. The Declaration of Independence, our first one. The first principles, it was devised on three principles. Number one, all men are born free and equal before the law. There is no special privileged people. All men. That's powerful. That had never been done in the history of the world. I'll tell you one place it had been done. That all men, because of their birth, are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men. And that number three, that government rests on the consent of the governed. There had never in the history of the world, except Moses, our forefathers went to the Bible. And they got the idea of having a nation without a king telling them what to do, a dictator, a ruler, a group of people who could govern themselves. Now, the idea was not new. They found it in the Old Testament, and God had created a nation called Israel that at that time had no king. They were a people that would learn to govern themselves provided you gave them principles to live by. Now, I'm going to stop. I just said something extremely powerful. You can govern yourself. You don't need a government over you. Our government today is way too big. It's turning into a tyranny. We all know this. It's a mess. And it's happened because we've allowed it. But so what did God do? He didn't give them a king, he gave them preachers. Now you might think, I knew you were going to bring yourself into this somewhere. Now just don't take up an offering. Okay, listen. Not that preachers would rule you. Church was never designed to rule you. The church was designed for me, the pastor, to show you what God said so you could adopt the principles and rule yourself. If we have a nation that's not founded on principles, the nation will collapse. Now let's come to the church. If we have a church and if we have a kingdom, and it is not based on principles, not doctrine. The church, Jesus did not die to give you a doctrine. He died to give you principles that you're to govern your life by. Now I'm going to say something here. If you're not governing yourself by the principles, are you a Christian? You're not. Boy, that's a heavy statement. That's right. It is a heavy statement. No one can make you and I do anything. Exactly. Jesus' Sermon on the Mount was a revolutionary thing for a man to do, because when you're reading it, it says, I say. You heard, and he's trumping Moses. The Pharisees went, who do you think you are? Moses said, I say. He's either God or he's a lunatic. And what he's doing is he's laying down the principles that the new kingdom would govern their lives by it. Now that's a powerful statement. A kingdom without principles will fail. A Christian who's not principled will fail. The Word of God, we are to be a people of the book. Now I want to go back a little bit to our Constitution. Do you mind? I'm going to anyway. Say yes. Thank you. I want to read to you. This came right out of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal in that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. They rule by what we say. They got to get our permission to do anything. That's our declaration. I think it's time to celebrate that. All right, now I'm going to read something else to you, and I want you to think about this. The men that signed the declaration that day, I want you to know this. When they did that, they were bucking their government. That's powerful, guys. That had never been done either. This was a letter they're sending to their king. We don't need you anymore. Let me ask you a question. It's a trick question. Would it be necessary for them to be committed to the principles? Yes. You better believe it, baby. Signing your name on that piece of paper you're going to send to the king, it's going to tick him off. So at the end of it, they said these words, "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." They're laying their life down for this thing that we're celebrating today. Had they not done that, wing ching hong wang ching, you would not be speaking English right now. You'd be talking something else. You might not even be here. So do you think that what they did was necessary? Well, I think what they did was necessary. They knew it was necessary. They already told the king, we would rather die on our feet than live on our knees. Now, we're talking guts here, but that's another story. Have you ever wondered what happened to the 56 men who signed that declaration? What fate befell them for daring to put their name on that document? 5 signers were captured by the British as traitors and tortured before they died. 12 had their homes ransacked and burned. 2 lost sons serving in the Revolutionary Army, and another had 2 sons captured. 9 of the 56 fought and died from wounds or hardship in the Revolutionary War. They signed, they pledged their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor. What kind of men were they? 24 were lawyers and jurists. 11 were merchants. 9 were farmers of large plantations and large plantation owners, men of means, well educated, but they signed the Declaration of Independence knowing full well the penalty would be death if they were captured. But now listen to me. Marriage without commitment, there isn't a marriage without commitment. There is no such a thing as a Christian not committed to the Word of God.
Yes, sir.
Woo! I think it's time America heard this. You walked an aisle. You bowed a knee. You said Jesus is Lord. The book became a book of principles that you're to lay your life down. That night, when they took communion that night with Jesus, not only did Jesus lay his life down, the disciples, they did too. What happened to the men that were in that upper room with Jesus? Does anybody know? Peter and Paul were martyred in Rome 66 AD during the persecution under Emperor Nero. Paul was beheaded. Peter was crucified upside down at his request, since he didn't feel worthy to die like the Lord. Andrew went to the land of the man-eaters in what is now called the Soviet Union. Christians there claim him to be the first one to bring the gospel to their land. He also preached in Asia Minor, modern-day Turkey, Greece, where he was said to have been crucified. Thomas was probably the most active in the area of Syria. Tradition has him preaching as far as India. I know that to be a fact because I've been to India and I've seen the work that he has done in southern India. And he's still attributed down there with bringing the gospel to them. And it's a very strong Christian area in India, where the ancient Christians revere him as their founder. They claim that he was died there, pierced with spears by 4 soldiers. Philip possibly had a powerful ministry in North Africa and also Asia Minor, where he converted the wife of the Roman proconsul. In retaliation, the proconsul had Philip arrested and put to death. Matthew, the tax collector and writer of the gospel, ministered in Persia and Ethiopia. Some of the oldest reports say that he was not martyred, and others say he was stabbed to death in Ethiopia. Bartholomew had a widespread ministry, travels attributed to him by tradition to India, back to Armenia, Ethiopia, southern Arabia. There are various accounts of how he met his death as a martyr for the gospel. James, the son of Alphaeus, one of the least, was referred to in the New Testament. There is some confusion as to which, but the James that reckoned to have ministered in Syria, Jewish historian Josephus reported he was stoned and then clubbed to death. Simon the Zealot, so the story goes, ministered in Persia and was killed after refusing to sacrifice to their sun god. Matthias, the apostle chosen to replace Judas, tradition sends him to Syria with Andrew and death by burning. John is the only one of the company generally thought to have died a natural death from an old age. He was the leader of the church in Ephesus area and said to have taken care of Mary, the mother of Jesus, in his home. It would behoove you to take care of Mary. Okay. He's accredited with writing the last book of the New Testament, the book of Revelation. Early Latin tradition has him escaping unhurt, etc., etc. Now, do you think that any of these guys were committed to what was happening in the upper room that day?
Yes.
They were. They were.
Yes.
They were. Christianity without commitment is not Christianity at all. And it's not a Christianity to a concept or a doctrine. It's principles. That would mean that a Christian would have a Bible and read it to find out what Jesus said. Speaking of Jesus, would you like to hear what he had to say?
Yes.
Well, that was weak. But anyway, if anybody, okay, go with me to Matthew chapter 7.